Have you ever noticed how quickly your mood can change? One minute, you're lying on the couch, mindlessly scrolling through Instagram. Nothing special. You're not shopping, you're not comparing yourself to anyone, you're just passing time. Then, a photo catches your attention. An old friend from college is standing in front of their new house. The kind of house that looks like a milestone. Maybe there's a shiny new car parked outside. Maybe the kitchen looks straight out of a design magazine. At first, you're genuinely happy for them. But somewhere in the back of your mind, another feeling quietly starts to show up. You begin wondering whether you're doing enough, whether you're moving fast enough, whether everyone else somehow got ahead while you weren't paying attention. And the strange part is that 5 minutes earlier, you felt completely fine. Nothing in your life actually changed. The only thing that changed was what you saw. Yet that brief moment of comparison can be powerful enough to affect how we feel, how we think, and even how we will live later on. So what's actually happening in those moments when someone else's success suddenly makes you feel uneasy? It turns out your brain is doing something it has been trained to do for thousands of years. Psychologists call it social comparison. We naturally measure ourselves against the people around us. Back in the day, that instinct was useful. If everyone in your community was getting stronger, faster, or better at finding resources while you were falling behind, that could be a real problem. But the world we live in today is completely different. Our brains evolved to compare ourselves with not hundreds nor thousands, but just a small group of people. Yet every day we scroll through endless highlights of other people's lives. Promotions, dream vacations, new homes, new cars, big milestones, one after another. And even when we know we're only seeing the best moments, a part of our brain still reacts as if it's receiving an important signal. Look where they are. Look where you are. That's when the pressure starts to build. We feel the urge to catch up, to improve something, to buy something, to prove that we're moving forward too. And before we realize it, we're browsing, comparing prices, filling shopping carts, chasing a version of success that wasn't even on our mind an hour ago. It's not simply a lack of discipline. In many ways, it's an ancient survival instinct trying to solve a problem that doesn't actually exist. Here, let me give you an example. Let's say there's a guy named Marcus. Marcus is doing all right. He has a stable job, pays his bills on time, has some money saved, and lives comfortably. If you looked at his life from the outside, you'd probably say he's doing pretty well. But like most of us, Marcus spends time on social media. He sees an old friend showing off a new BMW. A former coworker just bought a condo. Someone else is posting photos from yet another vacation. At first, he barely thinks about it. But over time, something starts to shift. Not jealousy exactly, just a quiet feeling that maybe he should be doing more, earning more, achieving more. So he treats himself to a new watch. A few months later, he moves into a more expensive apartment, even though he was perfectly happy where he was. Then he books a trip that wasn't really part of his plan. Each decision feels exciting in the moment, but the feeling never lasts. Because deep down, Marcus wasn't trying to buy a watch, a better apartment, or a vacation. He was trying to buy relief from that uncomfortable feeling that somehow everyone else was getting ahead. And that's the trap. When the problem is comparison, no purchase can really solve it. The excitement fades, the comparison returns, and the cycle starts all over again. What makes all of this so much harder today is the sheer scale of comparison. 30 years ago, most people compared themselves to a relatively small circle. Friends, neighbors, coworkers, people they actually interacted with every day. Now, every time we open our phones, we're exposed to hundreds of lives in just a few minutes. The problem is that we're not seeing real life. What we're seeing are the most beautiful and dazzling moments of each person. What we don't see are the trade-offs behind those moments. The stress, the debt, the long hours, the doubts, or the sacrifices that never make it into the photo. Yet our brains rarely stop to consider what's missing from the picture. Instead, we look at someone else's highlight reel and quietly wonder why our own life doesn't measure up. And that's often where the spending begins. Not because we truly need something, but because we're chasing a feeling of catching up, of being enough, of proving to ourselves that we're doing okay too. The truth is, many products aren't marketed around what they do. They're marketed around what they seem to say about you. They're not just selling a watch, a car, or a vacation. They're selling an identity, a story, a version of success that we're afraid of missing out on. But I think the most important part of this conversation is also the part that's easiest to avoid. Because when we look closely, a lot of these impulse purchases aren't really about the things we're buying. They're about what those things represent. Think about this. Most of the time, when you feel like you're falling behind, what you're really feeling is an underlying fear that you might never get as far as those you were once on par with. That's when, for a brief moment, buying something feels like an answer to quiet down that discomfort. However, that's just a temporary solution. Because the fear isn't coming from outside, but it is from inside. I've fallen into this trap myself, and maybe you have too. That's why financial advice alone often isn't enough. Two people can read the same book, hear the same strategies, and get completely different results. Because managing money isn't always about math. Sometimes it's about understanding the emotions that are quietly driving our decisions in the background. And until we become aware of those emotions, it's surprisingly easy to keep spending money in search of something that money was never really meant to provide. Now, I don't want this conversation to end with us simply recognizing the problem. Let's talk about a few things that can actually help. The first is surprisingly simple. Create a little space between the emotion and the purchase. Seriously, this is one of the most powerful things you can do. When you feel that urge to spend, after seeing something online, after comparing yourself to someone, just give it a day or two. What's interesting is that the urge often fades on its own. And when it does, you'll realize you've just saved a lot of positive energy and your finances. The second thing is to be more intentional about what you consume online. Pay attention to how certain accounts make you feel. Some people inspire you. Others leave you feeling inadequate every time you see their posts. If an account consistently makes you question your own progress or your own worth, it's okay to unfollow it, mute it, or simply see less of it. Not because you're jealous, but because your attention affects your mindset more than you probably realize. And finally, spend some time defining what enough looks like for you. Not for your friends, not for the people you follow online, not for society's version of success, for you. Because comparison becomes a lot less powerful when you're clear about what you're actually working toward. When you know your values, your priorities, and the kind of life you want to build, other people's achievements stop feeling like a scorecard. They're just living their life, and you're living yours. So honestly, that's exactly where a lot of peace begins. In the end, I think the most dangerous thing about comparison spending is how invisible it is. Most of us never consciously decide to spend because someone else seems more successful. It happens much more quietly than that. We see something, we feel something, and before we realize it, we're chasing a purchase that felt important only a few hours ago. But once you recognize the pattern, something changes. And from that point on, you have a choice. You can keep chasing other people's version of success, or you can step back and ask a different question. Am I building a life that actually feels right for me? It's not the easiest question to answer, but it's a far more meaningful one. Don't be someone who just watches and stays hidden in the shadows. Be yourself and create your own life. Who knows? One day your time might come knocking. All right, that's all I've got. If any part of this felt familiar, even a little, that's worth paying attention to. Leave a comment and tell me where you're at, okay? And if someone in your life needs to hear this, send it their way. Sometimes the most helpful thing we can do for someone is just say, "Hey, I think this might be for you." Take care of yourself. I'll talk to you soon.